How did we arrive at the world we live in today? Was cruelty, great suffering, degradation, racial and religious division our inherent nature and destiny? Or was humanity at one time highly advanced, and then the original order of society turned upside down, after which we have been the subjects of a vast human and social engineering project, not for our best interest, but that of negative beings who wanted nothing but total power and control over everything?
My name is Michelle Gibson.
I have come to believe as a result of my research that there was a hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system after a deliberately caused cataclysm that resulted in a worldwide flood of mud, which wiped out most of the original civilization. I think pockets of original people existed in underground locations, as well as the beings behind this, until enough of the original infrastructure was dug out of the mud flow to restart civilization. Then the Earth was repopulated through human and social engineering, primarily beginning in the 1830s. More on this later. I believe that negative beings were behind the cataclysm and hostile takeover and have executed and implemented an elaborate multi-generational plan comprised of fallen angels, reptilians, archons, and other negative extraterrestrial races with a negative agenda towards humanity, the creator, and creation, all of whom have been interfering on Earth, but who have managed to convince most people they don't exist. They had to do it this way because in a free will zone like Earth, the human beings who live here have to give their consent to choose whether to follow the light or the dark. The only way they can accomplish this acceptance, however, is by outright lies, deception, and duplicity, because if people knew the true agenda of these controllers, the majority of humanity would never, ever accept this. What I think is that they found a way to create a new 3D time loop between the years of 1492, the year of the fall of Granada in Spain, and the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, and 1942, which was midway through World War II and the year of the Philadelphia experiment, were the boundary years of a new 3D time loop called Rome. The new, what I believe was occulted timeline, was somehow inserted, and everything was grafted onto the existing infrastructure and falsely attributed in the newly written historical narrative. The Great Frost of Ireland of 1740 and 1741 was a 21-month period of time that is in the historical record in which the Irish population endured 21 months of bizarre weather without known precedent that defied conventional explanation. The cause is not known. I think this rip in the fabric of space-time allowed for non-human souls to incarnate in human form. Just 3 years after the Great Frost of Ireland, in 1744, Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in Frankfurt, Germany. He established his banking business there in the 1760s, marking the start of the international banking family and ultimately the central banking system. It is interesting to note that when Mayer Amschel Rothschild died in 1812, the Free City of Frankfurt in the Holy Roman Empire had become the Grand Duchy of Frankfurt in the Confederation of the Rhine after the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved in 1806 during the Napoleonic Wars. Prior to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the imperial throne was occupied by the House of Habsburg. Also called the House of Austria, the House of Habsburg was one of the most distinguished and influential royal houses of Europe. The male line died out in 1740 with the death of Emperor Charles VI. Then 4 years later, on February 6 of 1748, Bavarian Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, Germany. He went to a Jesuit school at the age of 7 and was initiated into Freemasonry in 1777. Weishaupt's radicalism got him in trouble with the ruler of Bavaria, and he fled to the Duchy of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg under the protection of Duke Ernest, starting in 1784. Adam Weishaupt published a number of works about the Illuminati there and died in Gotha in 1830, which is also interesting to note because the city of Gotha is the place of origin of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which produced the new ruling houses of Europe. More on this in a moment. It is interesting to note that the revolutions of 1830 took place in France, Belgium, Italy, Brazil, Poland, and Switzerland, the same year Adam Weishaupt died in November of that year. These revolutions led to the establishment of constitutional monarchies in France, with King Louis Philippe I of the Habsburg House of Bourbon as the monarch and last king of France. He was forced to abdicate 18 years later in the French Revolution of 1848. Notice the differences in complexion of these portraits of him findable in a search, with the fourth one of them appearing to be a photograph of a man with a darker skin complexion. The two-tone facial coloration of the portrait of King Louis Philippe I reminded me of another one I had seen like that. I had seen it with the two-tone face of King Charles III of Spain, shown here. Then these are existing portraits and statues for comparisons of depictions of King Philip II of Spain, also ruler of Portugal, as well as England and Ireland for a time, and the son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. These two portraits of Emperor Charles V are available to find in an internet search also, again with similar facial structure between the two portraits, the tilt of the chins, and the similar clothing. The 1830 revolutions in Europe also led to Leopold, the son of Duke Francis of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, which soon became the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, becoming King Leopold I of Belgium. One of King Leopold's nephews, Prince Albert, married his first cousin, Queen Victoria, in 1840, the daughter of Prince Edward of England and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Another one of his nephews, Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, married Maria II, the Queen of Portugal, and their son Pedro V of Portugal ruled from 1853 to 1861. The significance of the marriage of Ferdinand to Maria was the joining of the Portuguese House of Braganza and the German House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. This is its coat of arms, with two green wyvern supporters on either side of the insignia, and the wyvern tail within. As a matter of fact, the wyvern tail section is found in the coats of arms of not only the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, but in other European royal houses it ceded, like that of Hungary, Belgium, Bulgaria, and seen in Prince Albert's personal coat of arms. With the images of the wyvern, an unambiguously malicious predator, which in the coat of arms signifies war, envy, and pestilence, I think the members of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha were telling us who they really were, non-human souls in human form. It certainly appears that the different wars and revolutions since the 18th century were all about bringing down the once stable, hereditary ruling houses going far back in time, whose identity was misrepresented and whitewashed in our historical narrative, and new forms of government were established, ultimately one of the things leading to today's world. Someone recently referred to democratic dictatorships, which we have been seeing play out around the world, especially in the context of what has been happening to people's civil liberties in supposedly free countries because of the pandemic. I even found the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in the Republic of Texas, starting in 1842, in the form of the Mainzer Adelsverein, or Nobility Society of Mainz. One of the founding members of the Adelsverein was Ernest II, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and the older brother of Prince Albert. Organized on April 20th of 1842, it was a colonial attempt to establish a new Germany within the borders of Texas through organized mass immigration, and land was purchased via land grants from the Republic of Texas, but was said to have lasted only until 1853 due to a large amount of debt. Other things I found happening starting in 1830, besides the revolutions of 1830, include German Jewish immigrants starting primarily around 1830, arriving in cities all along important waterways, like the Mississippi River and Ohio River valleys, setting up shop, monetizing all available resources through the creation of the new economy, including the development of different industry sectors over time, and providing the currency and financial institutions for the new economy. National banks were established between 1863 and 1935 that were authorized to issue national banknotes to banks throughout the United States and its territories. Starting in the 1830s as well, alcoholic beverages became widely available and were promoted for consumption to the general population. Also starting in the 1830s, with the population explosion of poor people and parentless children, prominent elites in both Europe and America organized charitable aid movements, The prevailing social attitudes of the mid-19th century blamed people for their poverty and applied the notions of worthy and unworthy poor to charitable aid. On a different subject, I believe pre-existing infrastructure was dug out by immigrants from different countries and not built by them and/or restarted in order to be able to use whatever form of infrastructure it was, like canals, railroads, streetcars, among many other things, and not built by the people who took the credit for building them, like the Wabash and Erie Canal in Indiana, with groundbreaking said to occur in 1832. With the canal's construction completed by 1853 between Toledo, Ohio, and Evansville, we are told, it was made immediately obsolete with the opening of the Evansville and Crawfordsville Railroad to Terre Haute, which opened that same year, and only 2 flat barges made the entire trip. Similar stories were told over and over again about how the canals came into existence, only never to be used as major transportation thoroughfares because of the more efficient railroads coming online. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in the United States, the progenitor of the wealthy Rockefeller family and considered to be the wealthiest American of all time. A co-founder of the Standard Oil Company in 1870, Rockefeller helped set the stage for the mass production of gasoline-powered vehicles in the early 20th century. There is mounting evidence from a growing number of researchers that there had already been a worldwide free energy system in existence from the original civilization, including electric streetcar systems, which included residential routes like this historic photograph in a Charlotte, North Carolina neighborhood. With the mass production of gasoline-powered vehicles as a result of Henry Ford's assembly lines in Detroit starting in 1913, within a short period of time, like as soon as 25 years, electric streetcar lines were replaced with cars and buses, like the Lightning Route in Montgomery, Alabama, said to have been in operation for only 50 years, from 1886 to 1936. Like the canals before them, the demise of the ubiquitous electric streetcar systems was said to have taken place because of the arrival of gasoline-powered vehicles. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister during World War II, was famous for the following quotes: "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it." Propaganda works best when those being manipulated are confident that they are acting on their own free will. And it is the absolute right of the state to supervise the formation of public opinion. While not widely known to the general public, Operation Paperclip was a U.S. intelligence program which brought Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians to the United States following the end of the Second World War. I think humanity has been under continuous psychological warfare for a very long time. So I'm going to bring forward what has been going on in the world starting with the years between 1945 and 1960, which laid the groundwork for what was to come. The Big Three Conference in Yalta was held in February of 1945 between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin to discuss the post-war reorganization of Germany and Europe. Much was agreed to by the Big Three at the Yalta Conference, but what I want to highlight is the Declaration of Liberated Europe, the ratification of the agreement of the European Advisory Commission, and the groundwork for the United Nations. The Declaration of Liberated Europe was created by the leaders of the three nations as a promise to allow the people to create democratic institutions of their own choice and pledged the earliest possible establishment, through elections, governments responsive to the will of the people. So that is what they said. But is that what actually happened? The European Advisory Commission, or EAC, allowed each occupying power full control over its occupying zone, and the subsequent Cold War was reflected in the partition of Germany, as each occupying force could develop its zone on its own without influence from any overseeing body. With regards to the formal establishment of the United Nations in San Francisco in June of 1945, all the parties at the Yalta Conference agreed to an American plan concerning voting procedures in the Security Council, which had expanded to 5 permanent members, which were, with the inclusion of France, China, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The next Big Three wartime conference was held in Potsdam, Germany, between July 17th and August 2nd of 1945. By this time, Harry S. Truman was the U.S. president, and he was joined by Stalin and Winston Churchill until he was defeated in a British general election, and he was replaced by Clement Attlee as prime minister at the conference. Outcomes of the Potsdam Conference included, but was not limited to, the division of Germany and Austria into 4 occupation zones, with their capitals of Berlin and Vienna divided into 4 zones as well, the prevention of Nazi activity and preparation for the reconstruction of Germany into a democratic state, the decision to put Nazi war criminals on trial, war reparations to Allied countries, and the dismantling of Germany's war industry. It is important to note that during the same time period as the Potsdam Conference, the United States successfully tested the first atomic bomb on July 16th at Trinity Site near Alamogordo, New Mexico. The Potsdam Declaration was issued on July 26th, an ultimatum calling for the surrender of all Japanese forces, or Japan would face prompt and utter destruction. By August 5th of 1945, just a few days after the end of the Potsdam Conference, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, destroying the city and killing over 70,000 people. And the second atomic bomb was dropped on the shipbuilding center of Nagasaki on August 9th, several days later, killing around the same number of people as Hiroshima. Japan formally surrendered on August 15th of 1945, with the formal treaty signed on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on September 2nd of 1945. After the August 15th surrender of Japan in 1945, the Korean peninsula was divided at the 38th parallel into two zones of occupation, with the Soviets administering the northern half and Americans the southern half. In 1948, as a result of Cold War tensions, the occupation zones became two sovereign states, Socialist North Korea and Capitalist South Korea. The beginnings of the Cold War are firmly rooted in the events of 1945. Lasting from the formulation of the Truman Doctrine in 1947 until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, it was called Cold because there was no direct fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union, but engaged instead in things like proxy wars by supporting different sides of major regional conflicts, and these proxy wars characterized warfare all over the world until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, which is considered to be the end of the Cold War by many people. Aside from nuclear arsenal development under the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, said to have been intended to discourage a preemptive attack by either side and conventional military deployment, the struggle for dominance between the United States and the Soviet Union was expressed by psychological warfare, propaganda campaigns, espionage, rivalry at sporting events, and the space race. Generally referred to as the Chinese Communist Revolution, the Communists gained control of mainland China in 1949, forcing the leadership of the Nationalist Republic of China to retreat to the island of Taiwan. The partition of India in 1947 divided British India into the Hindu-majority Union of India and the Muslim-majority Dominion of Pakistan, and displaced 10 to 12 million people in forced mass migrations to the newly constituted dominions, and created overwhelming refugee crises, as well as large-scale violence, thereby establishing the conditions for suspicion and hostility between these two countries that has existed into the present day. This movement of people started right after India's official Independence Day from Great Britain on August 15th of 1947, and this division of people from the same country and turning them against each other upon independence from their colonizers is another pattern that characterizes what has taken place here. The Korean War started in 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25th following clashes along the border and insurrections in the South. North Korea was supported by China and the Soviet Union, and South Korea by the United Nations, principally from the United States. The Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on July 27th of 1953, ending the fighting, creating the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, to separate North and South Korea, and allowing for the return of prisoners. It was one of the most destructive conflicts of modern times, with around 3 million deaths due to the war, and proportionally a larger civilian death toll than either World War II or the Vietnam War. It caused the destruction of nearly all of Korea's major cities, and there were thousands of massacres on both sides. The polio vaccination of Dr. Jonas Salk was introduced in 1954 after polio epidemics ravaged Europe and the United States starting in the 1900s, causing paralysis and death for millions. We are told that already by 1957, as a result of the mass immunizations promoted by the March of Dimes, the annual number of polio cases in the United States was reduced from a peak of 58,000 cases annually to 5,600 cases. Did the vaccine really work that well, or did the pathogen just go away? Though I couldn't find a reference saying that Dr. Salk was a Freemason himself, I did find one on the Missouri Lodge of Research Facebook page, a group of Freemasons interested in the history and study of Freemasonry, that he developed the vaccine under the direction of a Freemason. The history of vaccines starts with the British physician Edward Jenner, who developed the first vaccine for smallpox, with the vaccination taking place on the first person in May of 1796. Jenner was a Freemason, becoming a Master Mason in 1802, and the Grand Master of his lodge from 1812 to 1813. The next vaccines that were routinely recommended, along with the smallpox vaccination, were developed in the early 1900s for protection against pertussis in 1914, diphtheria in 1926, and tetanus in 1938, which were combined into the DPT vaccine in 1948. More vaccines were added over the years, and by the 1980s, children received as many as 27 shots by 2 years of age and up to 6 shots in a single visit. So more and more of these vaccines were combined together. Thus, vaccines became a normal part of life, with all of us receiving goodness knows how many vaccinations over the course of our lives, starting in early childhood. The same year of 1954 that the polio vaccine was introduced, the Geneva Accords established North and South Vietnam with the 17th parallel as the dividing line, and the French agreed to remove their troops from North Vietnam. Within a year, the United States helped establish a new anti-communist government in South Vietnam and began giving it financial and military assistance. A mass migration took place after Vietnam was divided. Estimates of upwards of 3 million people left communist North Vietnam for South Vietnam, going into refugee status in their own country, and many were assisted by the United States Navy during Operation Passage to Freedom. Then in the 60s and 70s, there were many localized and regional conflicts, with proxy wars and civil wars throughout those years starting up, like in Vietnam after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, and in other Southeast Asian countries, Africa, and the Middle East, to name a few. Cambodia was ruled by Pol Pot, General Secretary of the Communist Party, and his Khmer Rouge Party between 1975 and 1979, leading to the genocide of the Cambodian people, considered to be one of the bloodiest in history, in which an estimated 1.5 to 2 million deaths occurred. The overthrow of the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie took place on September 12 of 1974 in a coup initiated by Marxist-Leninist actions in the military, and marked the beginning of a 17-year-long Ethiopian civil war, which formally ended in 1991. The Iranian Revolution that took place in 1979 culminated in the overthrow of the last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, on February 11th of 1979, to be replaced by the Islamic Republic of Iran, with what was called a unitary theocratic republican authoritarian presidential system subject to a grand ayatollah. Then, starting in 1981, the year I graduated from high school, the action went from localized armed conflicts to all hell breaking loose all over the world, with multiple assassination attempts and assassinations, AIDS, explosions in mines, frequent plane crashes, and planes blown out of the sky by bombs, many massacres and atrocities against innocent civilian populations, regular people being blown up in discos and restaurants, and traumatically dying at theaters and sporting events, terrorist hijackings and suicide bombings, a multitude of sinking ships and train wrecks, single-shooter mass shooting events, and on and on and on. Our collective human consciousness has been continuously seeded from 1981 on with the notion that we could meet a violent, horrible death randomly at any given moment by forces beyond our control, and genocide was committed on large numbers of people in populations where there was armed conflict around the world, and that somehow all of this is normal. Has the Earth's population been experiencing a very calculated and undeclared psychological war based on terror and trauma against all of humanity for the last 40 years to bring us to what is going on against humanity in the world in which we live in today? I think so. Over the years, our consciousness has been raised about false flags, defined as operations committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning blame on a second party. It is also interesting that from the beginning of the 1980s forward was when the personal computer and internet came into being in our lives, ultimately allowing us to instantaneously connect with each other all over the world and bypass mainstream media for news and information. Definitely a very important development for our mass awakening and a way out of tyranny and the dystopian nightmare that was planned for us. From all of my extensive research documented in my blog posts and videos, it sure looks to me like, along with the Zionist Jewish bankers and businessmen, the early Zionist Mormon leaders were also involved in the creation of the new civilization and narrative, as well as Catholic orders like the Jesuit and Franciscan missionaries, the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, and the royal houses of Europe. and their secret activities involved with the creation of the New World Order were carried out with the involvement of the highest echelons of secret societies, including the Freemasons, Oddfellows, and Knights of Pythias, and the Skull and Bones Society. I think Zionism is the vehicle by which the world's controllers, known by such names as the Illuminati, Cabal, Globalist Elite, and Bilderbergers, planned and executed the corporate structure for their global takeover of the world's finances, resources, and people. Zionists are a small number of related elitist family bloodlines, hidden in different nationalities and religions, to carry out their plans for world domination. It also seems that Zionism and Nazism go hand in hand. The parasitic and multidimensionally aware beings behind all of this want us to believe that suffering, sickness, misery, destruction, and death was and is our normal state of being, and not question what we have been taught about who we are. They are the only ones who benefit because they energetically feed on humanity's negative emotional states. At the same time, they have sucked up all the wealth of the earth for themselves.
Next, I'm going to share important background information about how I first came into awareness. I have had an interest in megaliths, ancient constructions with large stones around the world, ever since I learned about them from the Larousse Encyclopedia of Archaeology, which I purchased in the 1980s. And I loved watching shows as a teenager, like Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. It is safe to say that I have had an interest in the mysteries of Earth's history from a young age. By the early 2000s, I had traveled extensively and lived in many different places. It was starting in the early 2000s that I read books like Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods for the first time around 2007. And authors like Robert Bauval and his book The Orion Mystery, discussing evidence for the pyramids of Giza lining up with the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Graham Hancock and his wife, Santhafaya, co-authored a book together called Heaven's Mirror. I didn't read the book itself, but I watched the 6-part video series it was based upon, where they traveled to sacred sites around the world, showing among many other things how their layout mirrored the stars and constellations in the night sky. Like Angkor Wat in Cambodia, being a mirror of the constellation Draco. I also learned about sacred geometry around this same time from a Flower of Life workshop. Drunvalo Melchizedek had brought back knowledge of sacred geometry and other lost knowledge through his work, and it was through him that the concept of a physical planetary grid was first seeded in my consciousness back in 2010. At the time I thought, wow, that sounds great, but who could have built it? I also discovered megalithomania conferences for the first time in 2011, which were organized by Dowser and Earth energy researcher Hugh Newman. And among other great presenters at the 2011 Megalithomania Conference in South Africa was researcher Wayne Herschel. In addition to delving into some esoteric information involving the Freemasons, Wayne has done an outstanding job of not only providing star map correlations between temples on the ground in the Nile River Valley and constellations, he also provides us with star maps of places on the Earth and Mars and their correlations with heavenly bodies, mainly mirroring the Pleiades. Another researcher, Gary David, demonstrates the same kind of mirroring stars and constellations going on in the American Southwest as well, in what he calls the Orion Zone. So I learned about all of this, and it prepared me for what I found, and what to do with it when I found it. When I discovered the sacred geometric shape of a star tetrahedron on the North American continent, by connecting the dots of major cities and extending the lines out. Then I wrote down the cities that lined up primarily in circular and linear fashion, and got an amazing tour of the world of places I had never heard of, with remarkable similarities across countries. This whole process of tracking these alignments around the world is what has led me to uncover not only more evidence about one advanced, unified worldwide civilization that aligned Earth with the heavens, it has also led me to uncover the evidence for the hijack of the timeline that has taken place here, those who were responsible, and how it was covered up right in front of our eyes. First, I'm going to show examples of alignments on Earth with astronomical events from ancient to modern, not limited to stars, constellations, and planetary systems like the Pleiades, but also including solstices, equinoxes, lunar and solar cycles, and much more, from ancient times to modern. I also realized there was a code of keywords that cover up ancient infrastructure by calling them natural features. This is Keyhole Rock at Pfeiffer Beach at Big Sur in California. The light comes through the keyhole arch perfectly during the winter solstice time of year in December and January. The Durdle Door near Lulworth, England in Dorset also has a solar alignment during the winter solstice period. This is Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park in Utah, showing a solar alignment. And another solar alignment seen here between the Two Brothers Rock on the island of Fernando de Noronha, just off the coast of Brazil. In what I consider to be the most ancient infrastructure, I consistently see intentional terraforming of the earth from ancient times by master builders to create harmony, beauty, and balance between heaven and earth based on geometric principles. This is what is called the winter turret, framed perfectly in an archway at the Arches National Park in Utah, which has over 2,000 of what are called natural stone arches. We find the same phenomenon happening in Neolithic times. This photo shows a winter solstice sunset seen from the entrance of the West Kennet Long Barrow in the 5,500-year-old megalithic Avebury complex in southern England. And the sunset is framed in the entrance of the West Kennet Long Barrow as seen from inside the Long Barrow in the solstice, when light streams through to special stones waiting at the end of the chamber. From inside the West Kennet Long Barrow, there are places where you can see things at certain times, like the equinox moonrise and the Pleiades. The Watson Brake lunar mounds near Monroe, Louisiana are contemporaneous with Avebury. They are believed to be 5,400 years old and are considered the oldest earthwork mound complex in North America. The Watson Brake mounds are located on privately owned land and are not available for public viewing. Howard Crowhurst has been studying the megalithic alignments at Carnac in Brittany and France for many years, and he has been able to detail the geometric and archaeoastronomical layout of the sites around this part of Brittany. Other famous examples of archaeoastronomy include the sun perched perfectly on top of the central tower at the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia on the equinox, the time of year when the sun crosses the plane of the Earth's equator and day and night are of equal length. And the same phenomena occurs on top of St. Michael's Tower on Glastonbury Tor in southern England. What I have found in my research is that buildings and infrastructure from what would be considered modern times are also aligned with the solar and lunar cycles and other astronomical events, like the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty in Manhattan. This phenomena even includes the entire city street grid of Manhattan. A phenomenon known as Manhattan Hinge occurs twice every year, in which the setting sun or the rising sun is aligned with the east-west street grid of Manhattan on dates evenly spaced around the summer solstice and winter solstice. There are similar alignments with the sun and street plan that occur in other major cities like Toronto, Baltimore, Chicago, and Montreal. I find the astronomical alignment phenomena occurring with the tops of lighthouses and even at the Taj Mahal. Also, like with the landscape features I showed earlier that were framed perfectly by archways, the same phenomena occurs with archways and buildings all over the world, like in Spain at the Alcazar in Seville, and the Alhambra in Granada. In England at Oxford University, the Tower Bridge in London, in Paris, France, the École Militaire through the Eiffel Tower's archway. In Hungary, from the Fisherman's Bastion in Budapest, you can see the Hungarian Parliament building framed perfectly through the archways. And in Jordan, at Petra, an ancient city carved right into the rock. In India, the Taj Mahal in Agra, and the Iron Pillar of Delhi at the same complex. It is famous for the rust-resistant composition of metals used in its construction, said to have been made 1,600 years ago. In Mexico, at the Hospicio Cabañas in Guadalajara, In the United States, the Memorial Church at Stanford University in California, and the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn, New York, where we see the Empire State Building perfectly framed by the bridge foundation. Other similarities in different places include the architectural design of towers, window arrangements, and directional orientation. I found in Old Ouarzazate in Saharan Morocco on the left, Santa Cruz de Tenerife on the Canary Islands in the middle, and the city of Atchison in Kansas on the right. For point of information, the pyramids on Egypt's Giza Plateau on the left and the pyramids of Guimar on the island of Tenerife in the Canary Islands are also facing a certain direction as well. And it has been determined that the pyramids of Giza are oriented to the cardinal points of north, south, east, and west. How was such in situ precision mapping to the cardinal points of the compass accomplished over centuries in time and distances on Earth? Now on to the subject of how the people of this civilization were brought into resonance and harmony worldwide by frequency and vibration via cathedrals and healing tones. The cathedral's entire structure is designed and built as one big acoustic frequency energy resonator, and acted as an acoustic etheric electromagnetic circuit, and translates from the Greek to kata, meaning down, and hedral, meaning 3D geometric pattern, i.e., a cathedral is that which draws down heavenly power via harmonized geometric structures. Cathedrals were fully equipped with the range of multi-ton bells and pipe organs, from the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris to the Duke University Chapel in Durham, North Carolina. The following examples are more indicators that the entire structure of cathedrals were designed as acoustic frequency energy resonators. I encountered the diagram on the left showing the efficiency in decibels of the axial ratio of 2 antennae, and the shapes formed in the graph immediately brought this common shape of windows in cathedrals to mind on the right. This graphic is a graphic of what appears to be a relationship between cathedral doors on the right and the work of scientist and philosopher Walter Russell on the left, diagramming octaves, which are the intervals between one musical pitch and another with double its frequency. This shape of doors is found at cathedrals and churches all over the world, built in different centuries, with the Noumea Cathedral in New Caledonia in the South Pacific said to have been built between 1887 and 1897. The St. Nicholas of Myra Russian Orthodox Church in Manhattan, New York, said to have been built in 1883. The Church of St. George in Norwich, England, said to have been built in the 1100s, and the Turku Cathedral in Turku, Finland, said to have been consecrated in 1300. Not only that, cathedral rose windows look like the cymatic patterns of musical notes. Solfeggio frequencies make up the ancient six-tone scale used in sacred music, like, for example, Gregorian chants and Tibetan singing bowls. Each solfeggio tone is a frequency that can be used to balance one's energy and keep one's body, mind, and spirit in harmony. And the tops of organ pipes are found next to these cathedral windows, like those of the organ right underneath the cathedral rose window at St. Michael's Catholic Church in Kalida, Ohio, showing what appears to be a direct relationship between the frequency of the shape of the window and the music of the organ. The modern suppression of solfeggio frequencies is a major issue for humanity. In 1939, the music world agreed upon a concert pitch of 440 Hz instead of 432 Hz, and pipe organs were now out of tune and their use severely restricted. The current musical scale is not tuned into the solfeggio frequencies, and the results of this are believed to negatively affect our thinking skills and emotional states. In conclusion, imagine a world intricately laced geometrically with structures and buildings designed to resonate harmoniously with the cosmos and the heartbeats of humanity. A world not programmed, but tuned and co-composed by the dynamic living harmonies, rhythms, and timbres of all children of the earth and their majestic built environment, in harmony with the celestial spheres and the cosmos. Majestic, for the glory of God. Who built this beautiful, balanced, and harmonious civilization? I see an ancient, worldwide unified civilization, the Moorish civilization, going back in time to ancient Lemuria until relatively modern times, and that all of the Earth's infrastructure was built by the Moors. Since this is not in our historical narrative, we don't even question what we are told about it being built by other cultures or civilizations. Moorish masons of the ancient ones were the master builders of civilization, and their handiwork is all over the earth, from ancient to modern. All of their Moorish science symbolism was taken over by other groups claiming to be them, falsely claiming their works, or piggybacking on their legacy, or given a darker meaning by association with certain things that were not the original meaning. The true meaning of Moorish Islam is I self law am master. Islam in its original form is about mastering self as the creator in physical form, as well as applied sacred geometry and universal laws. I, from the creator of the universe, representing mother and child from whence you came. Self, each one of us is a trinity, this being the symbol of civilization. Law, the length, angle, and width of the cosmic energies that marked you. Am, the joining of two trinities, male and female principles, the triune which creates another I am. Master, this being the glyph for the planet Earth of which we are on and aspire to be master navigators upon. It was nothing like the weaponized form of radical Islam we see today that is playing such a divisive and destructive role in the world, that is not in accordance with humanity's best interests. By design, I might add. I have given just a sample of evidence for what I believe was an ancient, advanced human civilization on Earth that knew where they were in relationship to the rest of the universe, knew what they were doing as master builders, and knew who they were as divine beings having a human experience. And from what I see, nothing like the situation humanity finds itself in today.